Wonderful. So welcome everybody to DHAsia webinar. You can see that today's slides prepared by Lyndsey in the chat box, so you can tag along there. Okay, so DHAsia webinar is a series designed for DH researchers in Asia, DH scholars of Asia, and those who are keen on all things DHAsia. My name is Setsuko Yokoyama, Assistant Professor of Digital Humanities at Singapore University of Technology and Design. Now, I am today's host, but this webinar is organized by a group of scholars across the region. So let me pass the webinar planning team in a chat to acknowledge all the behind-the-scene labor that makes this webinar possible. And there's a new member who has just joined the organizing team who is not yet in the audience, but her name is Professor Jae-Yon from Korea University. And she'll be taking over Prof. Jae-Yon. And Prof. Jae-Yon, as many of you know, has been playing an instrumental role for the DH Korea team ever since we launched the DHAsia initiative in August 2023. That was at the ADHO conference in Graz, Austria. Now he'll be stepping down from the webinar local coordinating role because DH Korea team will be hosting the ADHO conference in 2026. And they need Jae-Yon's undivided attention as a representative of the Korean Association for Digital Humanities. So if you will, please join me in thanking Jae-Yon for his service for the webinar series. Thank you so much, Jae-Yon. We couldn't have done this without you.
No problem.
What is lucky for us is that today he's joining us as a discussant and moderator of the Q&A session. So please let me introduce him even further. Lee Jae-Yon is an associate professor of modern Korean literature at Ulsan National Institute of Science and Technology. His research interests include periodical studies, print culture, and cultural analytics. His recent publication includes a monograph from Routledge titled Formation of Periodical Authorship in 1920s Korea, Distant and Close Reading. And here I have the link to his monograph in a chat. And it's a work that explores the development of modern Korean literature through qualitative analysis of magazines. Well, thank you once again, Jae-Yon, for joining us today. Could you now introduce today's speaker for us?
Oh yeah, thank you so much, Setsuko, for the wonderful introduction of me. I'm really flattered. But today I'm here to help Dr. Lyndsey Twining for her presentation today. And Dr. Lyndsey Twining specializing in Korean cultural heritage and digital curation. And she works so as a freelance translator. In this year, 2024, she earned her PhD in cultural informatics from the Academy of Korean Studies. And her research focused on applying the digital curation methodologies to interpret Korean cultural heritage for global audiences. So today, she is going to give us a talk titled Linked Data for Learning and Designing a Semantic Portal for Cultural Heritage. Please welcome Dr. Twining.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and sparing your time today. I will share my screen real quick. One moment. Okay, is it in screen share mode? Does everything look all right? Okay, go back to the beginning. All right. So thank you, Setsuko and Jae-Yon, for your introductions and for all of your hard hard work in preparing this. As mentioned, my name is Lyndsey, and today for this webinar, I'm planning to introduce the key ideas explored in my PhD research, and introduce the platform that I designed to test the digital curation model that I kind of proposed in my research. So my dissertation focused on making a digital curation model for Korean cultural heritage in a global Korean studies context. But I know not all of you, excuse me, I had some coffee, but it's making my throat not work. One moment. Okay, sorry. I know everyone here might not be interested in Korea in particular. Maybe you have some interest in linked data or cultural heritage in general. So I'm going to be focusing on, oh, my voice has just gone. See, I apologize. One moment. Please bear with me. Sorry. Okay. Okay, starting again. So today I won't be focusing exactly on my PhD dissertation topic, but more on the broad ideas contained within them. And I'll also be showing the platform I made, which is still a work in progress. So please be understanding of that, but hopefully it will be of interest to some of you. And I hope that in the Q&A, maybe we can discuss more broadly within the DH community, like the accessibility of humanities learning resources, and maybe what kind of initiatives are going on in different areas, and what kind of needs or experiences the different communities across Asia and involved in DHAsia might have to offer. So first, I'd like to start with my methodological framework and research application, because DH is famous for having all different kinds of methodologies and areas of study. So I thought I'd just start out by kind of saying where I'm coming from. My major was cultural informatics, and so cultural informatics just generally looks at the question of what's the best way to digitally curate information that's contained in a particular resource for use in humanities, research, and education. So kind of what we do, our process is we familiarize ourselves with the resource. So this can be any kind of primary or secondary resource, so historical records or literature, cultural heritage structures, or even intangible heritage. So we kind of ask and we research what knowledge does it contain, and who is that useful for, and then how will it be used. And then we also train in a wide range of different data models, standards, and tools. And so based on our knowledge of the resource, like our very close knowledge of the resource and the different data models we know, then we develop an appropriate kind of solution or a way to curate that information. So we do semantic modeling, which is kind of an ontological design. So looking at the kinds of information and the relationships between that information within the resource. And then we look at data modeling. So then how do we take that information and put it in a form that can be saved in a database and accessed and queried? And through this process, we also directly participate in the compilation of the data. And my particular area of interest is in cultural heritage, as I mentioned, and Korean heritage in particular. And I'm also interested in humanities learning. So as opposed to like how we can apply digital curation for research, and which is the more typical application of kind of doing digital curation projects in DH, I'm interested in the learning aspect. And so because I'm interested in learning, I'm also interested not only in cultural heritage, but also secondary resources about cultural heritage, and particular in kind of cross-cultural context. So how do we introduce heritage, for example, Korean heritage, to foreigners or people in different countries who might not be familiar with that kind of historical or cultural context. And my area of interest is kind of informed a lot by my own experiences, being a foreigner who learned about Korea in the US, and then later moved to Korea and began working and studying here. So as I mentioned, in terms of methodology, we need different approaches for different subject material and for different objectives. So in the case of learning, so when we're looking at digital curation, not for research, but for learning in particular, we have a couple of things that we have to consider that's different than just for research purposes. So when people are, engaging in learning, you come at it from a lot of different points of entry and objective and interest. So you can learn about humanities topics, culture or history in a formal context, or also informally. It could be school, anywhere from elementary school to graduate school. You can encounter it in your workplace or in performance venues or museums. And you can, maybe just be learning about it just to pass a class, or you might want to travel to a country or, explore history or culture just for fun. So that's a lot different from research, where you have a very narrow focus and objective for what you're trying to study or research. Another thing is that there's the phrase, you don't know what you don't know. So while researchers kind of have a framework for how to understand the data and the different materials they're working with, somebody who's just learning, they might not even know what to search for, what keywords they need to look for, what institutions offer things, whether the source is reliable. And this is not only for learners, but also educators. So for example, professors at university will be very aware of what kind of things they need to teach, but maybe there's some elementary school teachers, or there's some, for example, Korean language teachers who might be familiar with the Korean language, but not know about history and culture as much, right? So that's another consideration. And then there's also kind of an undefined data set. So there's always new materials being produced, whereas if you're looking at historic documents, you have a specific collection or a specific work that you're working with. And so it kind of, you have that built-in structure. But for learning and different learning-related resources, you have to deal with those kind of uncertainties. So this means that you need a kind of centralized point of access for making it easy to access these different curated materials. And you need to provide greater context, different search options, and transparency of the sources, more so than just for research-based curation. And for cultural heritage in particular, cultural heritage is a really valuable learning resource for the humanities. It's our primary resource, right? The historic documents or the artwork or the archaeological sites are what form the kind of basis of humanities research. And cultural heritage also has a lot of sensory elements, visual or auditory elements that can aid in learning. You can view a single heritage in a lot of different contexts, from looking at it from a religious perspective, or from a geographic perspective, or from a particular time period. So you can see one heritage in a lot of different ways. And then there's also a lot of different kinds of heritage. So you can compare different kinds of heritage also across these different contexts and through these different lenses, which makes it really interesting for learning. But it's also limited by its physicality and subjectivity. So even, for example, intangible heritage is connected to the person who's practicing it, right? So it might be difficult to visit a historic site or see an object in person, or go to a concert by a master artist of a particular heritage practice. So it's really difficult to access. And you also need a certain level of historical or conceptual context to be able to understand it. And that kind of historical interpretation is also subject to interpretation and contestation. So that means that when we're looking at cultural heritage and digital curation related to cultural heritage, we have to rely a lot on digital facsimiles, which mean that digital curation is really important. And we also have to remember that the heritage has the most value when it's shown in context. And so we have to consider, how can we best contextualize that cultural heritage? So based on my own methodological training, I kind of approached this from the perspective of linked data. So linked data to put it very simply, I borrowed the definition from Wikipedia, is structured data which is interlinked with other data, so it becomes more useful through semantic queries. So basically, it's a way to convey complex relationships in a machine-readable format. And it often comes in this form of a graph or a network where you have different nodes and they're connected via different edges to other kind of nodes. And there's a lot of different vocabularies or ontologies that you can use to create this linked data. And when we look at cultural heritage, linked data has been used for quite a long time in various models like the Europeana data model. And there's new models as well and new platforms like Linked Art, Research Space, and Lux that are being produced. So it's very popular in the heritage sector, I think, because it's really good at conveying the heritage, like the objects, and also their context. So who made the heritage? What kind of heritage is it? Where is it located, or where was it made? When was it made? And so that kind of contextual information is important for managing and researching the cultural heritage. But the existing models focus primarily on museum and archive collections, to the exclusion of historic sites or structures or intangible heritage. And they're often quite isolated. So even if they use the shared vocabulary or data schema, they're not often connected. And the design of these data models or schemas focuses mostly on research management and research. So it considers it doesn't necessarily consider the needs of somebody who might not know already about the significance or meaning of this heritage and all these historical figures related to it, all these places. Of course, there's exceptions, but broadly, this is the kind of focus so far. And to put in a bit of a theoretical model, this kind of aligns, the existing models align a lot with the model proposed by my advisor, my PhD advisor, Professor Kim Hyun, who was the founding president of the Korea Association for Digital Humanities. And he proposed the model of the encyclopedic archive. So this is the idea that, the information in digital encyclopedias and digital archives should be connected to one another, because you need the information, the encyclopedia, to be able to understand the significance of the archives, and the archives then also support the arguments and the information proposed or conveyed in the encyclopedia. And so we see here the objects or primary sources, the heritage materials, and then these conceptual ideas that surround it, and those working together within the framework. So that has already kind of been well established in regards to linked data and cultural heritage. But for me, I was looking at, well, what more do we need for this learning context? And so I drew inspiration from the field of heritage interpretation because of my background as a translator of Korean cultural heritage. So there are various kind of ideals or principles behind heritage interpretation. And among them, two I drew quite a bit of inspiration from, which was the idea that successful heritage interpretation, so explaining the significance of a heritage, it's important when you're doing that. It's important to relate to the audience. So, what's their background knowledge? What are their objectives or interests? And we also should provoke engagement. So they're not, you're not just conveying information, but you're kind of inspiring them to want to learn more or want to protect the heritage or become more involved. And so taking these principles of heritage interpretation, I applied them to this digital curation model, and kind of approached it from this perspective that within the learning environment, these kind of archival and contextual data is not the destination. So when we're doing research, that information, that knowledge is like the source material for the research and how we manage the heritage. But in a learning context, I'd like to kind of propose that that data actually can serve as doors and bridges that facilitate the journey between some sparked interest or being involved in in wanting to know about cultural heritage or the humanities, and then using that knowledge you gain to then kind of go on and do other things related to it. So to that end, I added these two key elements to the existing model. So the idea of reference resources, so different texts and media of all different kinds. Texts and media to be able to dive deeper and learn more, and also different participatory activities. So that will allow you to get involved. So you just don't passively learn, but you might learn about something and then you can go see a concert of that performance, or you can buy some goods produced by an artist, like a master artisan, or go to a workshop and make some crafts yourself, right? So supplementing the existing model with these kind of learning resources and participatory activities. So if you look at it in different elements, you can see on these different axes of reality, or maybe more objective information, and then different interpretations. And then you can also see it from physical and mental, and these different kind of elements play a different role. And we can also, for the sake of time, I'm kind of skipping over these, but you can also see this as a process as well, how we as people interact with our physical and intellectual environments and try to understand it and change that environment as well. So I kind of tried to bring this all together through a kind of form of a platform. So what would that look like? So in my dissertation, I proposed the idea of this semantic portal, which is a kind of digital hub that provides contextualized access to different linked materials. So whereas maybe the digital encyclopedia or archive act as a repository with the data and the management of the data itself as like the key goal of the curation initiative or work. You have that, and then we have meta archives, which is kind of a centralized place where you can search different kinds of multiple databases at once. The semantic portal is similar, but different in that it acts as a hub that provides links to various interpretive resources, and then these are contextualized and made discoverable through that kind of repository data, so the archival entities or the encyclopedia entries. And then in turn, these various interpretive resources provide context for that data that would be in the encyclopedia or the archive. But I had the thought that this is kind of only valuable if it can actually be implemented. So the whole point of this is to try to make resources more accessible. But if the model is so theoretical that it cannot actually be implemented in a real way, then it's not really useful. So one of the big goals for my dissertation research was, can I try to at least make a prototype, even if it's not perfect, that can show that, oh, this kind of a model can actually be implemented? And so I tried doing that through in my research. But I had several practical considerations for the development of such a prototype platform. So I wanted it to utilize existing software. One, because I don't have a programming background, I cannot build some website or complicated system by myself from scratch. And neither can other people who might want to use this kind of a platform themselves, right? So I wanted it to be able to build upon existing software, and ideally something that's free, reliable, open source, so there aren't as many barriers to utilization. It needed to be web-based and collaborative just based on the nature of the platform. And ideally, though, with viewing and editing permissions, so you can control who can edit and change what, It needed linked data functionality because the whole model is based on the idea of linked data. And I also was hoping that it could have a kind of invisible ontology through a user-friendly UI. So one of the tricky things about having humanities researchers being involved in DH projects, maybe some of you have experienced this, is that, it's not always easy to make the jump from the humanities knowledge to actually, compiling the data and things like that. But if then you put that work to just computer scientists, then they don't understand the humanities knowledge either. So I wanted to be able to set it up so that humanities researchers, for example, can add information to the data according to the ontology, according to the data model, without having to really know what's going on at the back end, to make that process of being able to contribute to the data more easier. So based on that, I decided to go with use this software called Semantic MediaWiki, which is an extension to the MediaWiki software. And I'm sure even if you haven't heard of MediaWiki, you've heard of Wikipedia. Wikipedia uses the MediaWiki software. And there's other websites as well that use the same software. And one of the benefits of the software is that it's very widely used. So it has a lot of different data visualization extensions or different ways to incorporate data search, navigation, things like that. So there was a lot of customizability and existing tools that I could use when creating the platform. And the way that Semantic MediaWiki works is that basically each wiki page serves as the node in the network. And then the links, Wikipedia, if you've gone there, is very famous for all of its links, and that is what makes it quite useful, I think. So within this Semantic MediaWiki, each of those links becomes the edge of the network. And so it's designed basically to create linked data just on the wiki website itself. And so you can use it to define the ontology as well, with wiki categories serving as the different classes. And you can also define special pages for properties with different types of data. You can import external vocabularies, which is important for kind of interoperability if you're looking at linked open data. And it also supports sub-objects and other kinds of structural features. And in terms of how do you then input the data, display the data, and query the data, as I mentioned, these wiki pages serve as the DB interface. So there is a database in the back end, but for the most part, you can just use different features directly on the wiki pages to be able to add and query data. So I used other extensions to be able to create these user-friendly forms to be able to easily input the data. And then once that's inputted, I use different templates so that it's saved according to the data design. And then that saved data can then be queried to display content on the page, make that page appear on related pages, and then also make that page appear as search results. So yeah, and this is all automated using wiki templates, which are basically kind of a simplified version of HTML and then some query languages. And so you can create the templates as wiki pages, and then they call one another to save and then display and query the information. So kind of now moving on to what does this maybe actually look like and how is the content organized? So if you open the PPT page, you can click on this image to go to the site. As I mentioned, I'm in the midst of redoing the website, so there's not much data on it and things might be a little bit wonky, but anyways, you can try to follow along if you'd like. So here you can see there's the 4 different kind of categories of materials that I mentioned: heritage, contextual information, different resources, and then different activities. And if you look at the top, these kind of categories are subdivided even further based on the different kinds of metadata or kind of content that they need to include on each of the pages. And then so the basic information that each page would have would be things like the name of the heritage or resource, the dimensions, different characteristics, the subject, like what it depicts, the contributor, so who contributed to that resource, the location, like where is this held, the structure. So are there any objects within objects, or books within a series, or buildings within a larger complex, right? So what's the structure of that resource? Links to connect to the external websites. The source, so this is kind of for citation purposes, like where is this information found from, and then events, so basically the history of the heritage site or the publication date, things like that. And this information was designed based on the existing ontologies with a bit of modifications, and still as I'm adding more data and looking at different use cases, this keeps changing. But for example, if you go to the site, all of these images also have links to the individual pages if you click on them. So for example, a historic site might have the official names, what kind of a heritage it is, its function, who was it founded by, when was it made, is it officially designated like by UNESCO or by the Korean government, what kind of parts are included within it, and where is it located. For his historical figure, on the other hand, you would have names, but you might have posthumous names or temple names or taboo names. And you might have their nationality or their clan or their parents and family. And also, when were they born? Did they die? Things like that. For maybe resources like a book, you would have the title, the language, the different dimensions, authors, publishers, and a link to, purchase or find more information about that book. And for experiences like an exhibition, for example, you would also similarly have title, language, what subjects it depicts, who hosts the exhibition, when is it held for, and links to the location or more information. And for the sake of time, I'll skip this, but one of the kind of unique features of my model is that I use sub-objects to convey complex details. So basically it means that you're using kind of a child node to connect that information to the other nodes. And this allows for greater detail and customization, but it comes at the cost of query efficiency. So if you're looking for big network analysis, this isn't an efficient kind of route to go, but because that wasn't my objective, I found that this was quite useful. So for example, when you say a person's name, for example, you can see it's their former name, or it's their current name, or it's their preferred name, or for example, official names of a historic site. For example, UNESCO calls it Hwasong Fortress, but the Korea Heritage Service calls it Hwasong Fortress Suwon. So in these different cases where you have to group information together, you can use these sub-objects. So that's kind of the design approach I took. And I'll try to finish on time and keeping track of the time. So how can the site be used? So for people who produce and provide different content, they can, as I mentioned, use forms to easily create pages for the various resources or activities they have to offer. And this can help them reach their target audiences by kind of integrating into the network of information and data that's on the site. And they can also retain control of the content. So they're not uploading it to the website, they're just creating a page to link to it. And then if they create their own page for their institution, or if they're an individual, then as they add resources and as they say that they're the creator of that resource, that will automatically generate a portfolio on their page. And they can also use it to kind of gain insights on the market, or what's going on in the field. So you can search to find existing materials for comparison or see what kind of resources are needed. And you can also find other people who are collaborating on similar topics. So for example, I'm still trying to make the interface prettier, but you can see here at least that you can have easily input the different kind of information and use drop-down tabs or automatic, what is it called? Automatic filling in the answers to make it kind of easier process. And then by just filling out this information in a form, you automatically create this page. So this is all just generated based on the information put in the form. And yeah, as I mentioned, for example, if the National Museum of Korea were to make a kind of page, then every time they would add an exhibit or some kind of heritage that they manage, it will automatically be added to their related pages. Yeah, and then for students or educators, they can use the different filters to browse for relevant information, which means they can have tailored results. And it also helps that if they don't know exactly what they need, like they don't know maybe the keyword, like for example, there's a palace in Seoul they want to go to, but they forget the name because it's really long. They can just search palace and then Seoul using the filter, and then hopefully it will pop up in the results. And also in the case of, probably this is the case for other Asian studies areas, but there's different romanization systems and different ways to translate words. So this kind of filtered results might be helpful for that as well. And then you also can use the different links that are generated on the pages to kind of organically move from one page to the other. So for example, here I show filtering the different references. So you can find book, of all the reference materials available, you can look for books, journal articles, and online exhibitions, and then filter from there ones that are about Buddhism, and then from there filter ones made by the Gyeongju National Museum, right? So you can have different levels of customization to the filters. And then again, you can also use the links on each page to kind of, go on like a wiki adventure, I forget the word for it, but go first. So first you can start with a drama, Korean drama you saw. And so you want to learn more about the history behind the drama. And then you see it involves King Cheongjo. And so then you click on King Cheongjo, and then you find he created Hwasong Fortress, and you want to learn about that. And so then you click on Hwasong Fortress and you see, oh, it's a UNESCO World Heritage. And then you can go, well, what other UNESCO World Heritage sites are there in Korea? And you can kind of go through and find the context or different information that you would need. Oh, sorry. And you can also use the same tool to find out the source of different resources and find out so basically, let's say you want to learn about the royal protocols. You can see information on kind of different dictionary or well-known kind of sites like Wikipedia or Wikidata and compare what they have there. And then you can also use the search feature so as I mentioned, there's any resources that are related to the royal protocols are automatically generated as a related page. So you can then search from them to see, for example, experiences, media, or resources. And then from among them, you can kind of click on the people who created it or the institutions that created it to compare and see, is this a legitimate site? Like, have they made, or institution, have they made a lot of resources on the same topic? What's their experience? What's their background? Who are they funded by? And so that can help students and educators be better judges of the resources. And there's also the option to have user-created project pages where you can make your own lesson plans, essays, exhibits that use the linked data on the site. So as an example, I made this Learning Korean through Hwasong Fortress lesson plan, and you can include links in the actual text so that students can click the keywords and learn more about them. And then I also used a simple query to pull up all the names of the buildings in Hwasong Fortress, so you can kind of compare the Korean and the Chinese characters and the origin. And you can use it, students, for example, can choose their favorite one. And I didn't show it here, but you could also, for example, go on a VR tour and click the VR images for each of these sites and kind of create your own tour. So there's options to use the data on the site as well, not just kind of add data or view data. So because I'm running out of time, basically I still have a lot of remaining tasks. I need to finalize the ontology and optimize the server and update the software and things like that. And once that's done, then I actually have to go properly add more data. And there's also these unresolved issues that are not easy to deal with of, how would a project like this be funded or managed in the long term? Who would be able to compile the data, and what would the scope of the data be? How do we deal with copyright issues? So up until now, I basically just linked to other websites and didn't save them on my own, and it's just for a small research project, so there's not really problems with copyright, but that could be a concern if there's more data on the website. And then also user permissions, like how do we MediaWiki has a lot of ways to control user permissions, but how would we determine those kind of guidelines? And then in terms of like potential applications or things that we could do with this kind of project, you can make a multi-language wiki family, develop a kind of package that can be used in other different contexts. So not just Korean cultural heritage, but just a basic package that can be tweaked for each purpose. Maybe integration of LLM to make querying easier. You can apply it for automated translation possibly, and then maybe the integration of e-commerce or reservation systems for different purchasing goods made by artisans, or reserving concert tickets or something like that. So just going forward, this is, even though it's my PhD dissertation project, there's still a lot of work I want to continue on with it going forward. And so I hope that in the remaining time, maybe we can discuss like how can the DH community work together to support cultural heritage and humanities learning initiatives, and then maybe consider what kind of unique circumstances are we each dealing with that might make a project like this more successful, or there might be some barriers in different cultures or contexts. So maybe we can discuss that as well. So I hope you gained something from this talk. I went a little bit over on time, but yeah, I'm looking forward to your questions. And here you can have my contact information. So even if you can't ask a question today, please feel free to send me an email or get in touch, and I'd happy to go in more depth if needed. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for your wonderful talk. I guess Lyndsey's presentation explores how effectively provide well-organized information on Korea's cultural heritage through digital curation to overseas researchers, students, and then general public. I think her work spans the broader field of heritage studies and more specifically specific domains within the digital humanities, such as linked data and data modeling. It is really rare to find scholars who not only view the Korean culture and history from an international perspective, but also utilize digital tools to amass the comprehensive and sophisticated knowledge about Korean studies. In this regard, I believe Lyndsey is going to be a key figure who will lead the globalization of digital Korean studies in the future. That said, I have a couple of questions about your presentation. The first, could you maybe talk more about the features of archives model that underpins your work? Your PhD thesis, you refer to ontological platforms like CIDOC-CRM and RDF, Resource Description Framework, and introduces examples such as Europeana in Europe and the Smithsonian Learning Lab in the US. How does the archives model provided, Professor Kim-Hyun, compare to your these international examples of semantic portals of digital curation? Additionally, what unique features, I mean, you said already, but repeat one more time, because that's a really important part of your thesis. What unique features does your portals bring to Professor Kim Hyun's model? Second question concerns the practical application of your portal. I can only imagine how much time and effort you put into building this. I mean, with this beautiful portal, I mean, it seems like you primarily intended the portal for educational use. The ability for educators to create their own project pages within this portal and bundle the information provided onto the teaching materials significantly enhance the educational values of the portal, I think. But on the other hand, I'm curious about how you envision your portal contributing to existing Korean studies research. if your digital curation model could reorganize and reinterpret the knowledge about the specific historical events, cultural phenomena, or figures, in what ways it might do so? That's a second. But it looks like we would like to have questions from the audience. So I would like to skip the third one. So
So to talk a little bit about the model, maybe I will quickly share my screen again just to show the graphic. Yeah. Okay. Share. So this model, the NSIVES model, this is kind of the theoretical framework for that I built upon for my research. And as you mentioned, I looked at in my dissertation, I didn't talk about it in much depth, but in my dissertation, I looked at different data models like DHAsia, CIDOC-CRM, and looked at the structure and kind of what kind of information they were conveying. And I also looked at a lot of museum collections or different, Smithsonian Learning Lab, also Asia for Educators, like a lot of different platforms and also other DH projects just to see how they were structured and what kind of information they had. And so, and then together bringing on this heritage interpretation theories that I studied in my master's for my master's thesis, I kind of got a lot of inspiration. So I guess it wasn't the most methodological approach in that regard, but looked at a lot of different case studies and various related models and tried to see like what was missing and tried to kind of put them together and add to them. And so in terms of what makes it different is I couldn't find any platform or existing model that had both the heritage objects. I'll stop the sharing since you had a chance to look. I wasn't able to find anything that had the heritage objects and then the context, like the people, places, things, ideas related to it, plus resources, plus activities. So for example, Google Arts and Culture had some resources and things like that, but they were only within Google, so they didn't link to anything external, or there would be some related references or resources, but they weren't kind of contextual. Those resources were just links. The resources weren't contextualized themselves. So I noticed these different missing pieces, and so I ended up kind of building upon the existing model so that the resources, what I mean by resources like text and media, and these activities are just as an important part of the model rather than like a secondary feature added to the archive or added to the encyclopedia. So that focus that kind of equally prioritizes those is a kind of unique feature of my model. And in terms of the platform and how it can help with Korean studies and maybe offer new insights. So doing digital humanities, I always get the question like, well, what does your research show? Like what is the humanities finding of your research? Because traditionally you look at a historic document or historic text and then you try to find some new findings about history or about that resource or something, right? But for me, I'm looking at, okay, well, what is the nature of that resource? And then how can we translate that into the computer, like machine readable form that then can be used? So I've gotten a lot of critiques like, are you really doing humanities research, right? So that's an important question, like what can this contribute? But I think the value is that by simply creating metadata on these historic sites, for example, and turning that into linked data, even if I personally do not do that research myself, I can help enable students and other researchers to do data based off that linked the link research based off the linked data. So for example, there might be cases where a certain artisan made different Buddhist sculptures. And individually, on each of the texts about those Buddhist sculptures, you have information about who, when, and where it was made. And then just by simply adding that kind of metadata for each of the artifacts over time, and that builds up, then suddenly you'll be able to see, have a map, automatically generated map showing where the sculptures made by that artist were made and when. And then you can use that to maybe see, well, is there something that's out of place, right? Like, maybe that person couldn't have been there at that time because another resource says that they were here at that time, right? So you can use it to kind of, even by just simply adding information on the heritage, you can find new knowledge over time. So that's one way that it can contribute. And hopefully by doing that, it means that students can also get more involved in the research process as well. And then because those concepts are also linked to related resources, students can easily more find ways to support their arguments or theories if everything's connected. But the problem is you need a lot of data for that to be effective, right? And so that's the big question is that really possible? So I think in theory, it could be very helpful in terms of student engagement and providing more access to those kind of resources, but it would require a lot of collaboration over time. But there already is existing metadata that can be used. If it's just simply added, that would already really help to move that process along. So
thank you very much. Thank you. So maybe we can have more questions from the audience if they have. Oh, yeah, Setsuko, please.
If I may, thank you so much, Lyndsey, for sharing your dissertation work, and congratulations once again for becoming a doctor. I was especially amazed by how you characterized Wikipage as a database interface, and that was eye-opening. I've never seen Wikipage as an interface that would sit on top of all the institutions that you're pulling the heritage items from. So to me, the Wikipage then is like a cross-institutional interface that sits on top of all the existing repository or collections. So that was really really eye-opening. And this is not necessarily a question, oh no, but not necessarily. So this is something that occurred to me as I was listening to your future visions for the project, and because it was really inspiring, I kind of thought about possible ideas that might be of interest to you. So right now, you just address the kind of humanities research question, and I think it makes sense that given you are doing the cultural informatics, you are looking at the kind of infrastructural design of the humanities work that takes place. With that in mind, I think it might be generative to focus on the user experience. So you're thinking about inviting the users to contribute to the site, to grow the collection, for them to have the portfolio page. So if you could, invite the K-12 students, educators to I don't know, to contribute to the platform, and for you to then study how they interact with the interface. So this is like a traditional UX design situation where your users are either students, contributors, educators. So I think the subject matter that you'd be studying would be the contemporary users engaging or trying to engage with the heritage items. So that was one idea that I had, and I think along the way, students will learn how to make a wiki entry and how to link their wiki page to a reliable source. And I think that would be very valuable in terms of the media literacy education. So I can see what you're doing. Yes, you've been, dealing with the historical materials, but what you're doing is very contemporary and kind of forward-looking, and to making heritage something that is that needs to be like kept alive through people and through their appreciation, through their engagement. So those are some of the ideas that occurred to me as I was listening. So thank you so much for your inspiring project, and thank you for sharing with us.
Thanks for your comment. I see there's one other question, but before that, I just will respond to what you said. So in terms of getting people involved to use the website, I actually was talking to a group of young people who give tours at the main historic sites in Seoul, and they're really, really I happened upon them and I was so impressed by their interpretation skills, heritage interpretation skills, which I have very high standards. And so I started talking to them, and we set up a plan going forward to do what you said, to try to have them use the website. But I need to fix some back-end things first before I'm able to kind of do that. So but yeah, I do have some plans to do what you suggested. So I hope that I can make progress on that soon. And then there's one question in the chat. I'll just, I guess, read the question. So it's from Tomoe Kumojima. Thank you for your question. It asks, thanks so much for your presentation. I'm wondering if you use a unique ID for each item to organize data. So this is a really important element for creating data. So in the case of Semantic MediaWiki, how it works is that informally, each wiki page title, the name of the wiki page, serves as the ID. And I believe that in the backend, in the database, I'm still trying to learn exactly how the backend database structure works, but I believe that there's also number IDs that then link to so there's unique number IDs at the backend, but from the user experience, the ID is the name of the wiki page. But the problem is that you need to have unique names for each wiki page. But what if you have things that have the same name, right, or something? So you have to, so that's why you usually use numbers, right, as IDs to distinguish them. But in the case of the wiki pages, you have to have the wiki page be the ID, at least when you're generating the page. So how I got around this is that for each of the wiki pages, the title might have its own, I'm creating a kind of guideline for how to name pages based on the type of material it is. So for example, if it's an image with the same name, you can put the image in front, or different naming guidelines. But in terms of the interface, the wiki name is hidden, and you can choose a preferred name to show on each page. So the name that showed on the wiki page is different from the actual name of the wiki page. And then within the database, there's also an ID as well. And so it's a bit of a unconventional practice for people who might be coming at it from a more traditional database design method, but it's a kind of weird feature of using Semantic MediaWiki. So that's how it works with this software. So I kind of created my own workaround so that you can have the individual IDs, but then the title of the page can be whatever you would like it to be. So that's how I approached it. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Hey, wonder if we have more questions. If you have any, please let us know. If there's none, then okay. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation, Lyndsey, today, and I really appreciate it. And also, thank you, CIDOC, for organizing and then running our workshop series. Thank you for the audience. Thank you everyone for coming today's talk.
Yes, thank you so much. We can always continue our conversations, and if you have more questions for Lyndsey, you can write to her, or you can ask questions via DHAsia Discord channel, and here's the invitation link, and you can find us here. So thank you once again, Lyndsey, for sharing your work, and thank you, Jae-Yon, for moderating our discussions.
No problem at all.
Yes,
Okay.
and thank you everyone for coming.
And also, if you're interested in presenting your work in our workshop, please contact Setsuko.
That's right.
She's running our workshop series. Thank you.
Yes, and if you're interested in the organizing side of things, we are always looking for team of people to keep this running. Good news is that our next DH webinar is already scheduled. So that's happening next week on Wednesday, 2 p.m. Tokyo time. And if you happen to be free, here's the registration link. So I invite you to register. It will be the last session of the year. So I hope you, your colleagues, and your friends and students can join us there. So let's call it a day, and round of applause to Lyndsey and Jae-Yon and everybody in the room. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone, for sparing your time. Bye.
Hope to see you soon again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.